welcome to this November 27, 2023 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And thank you again for joining us. And with that, I'll call this work session to order, and I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Our two work sessions tonight are slightly linked. So the first, and why Ethan's at the table, is our annual discussion about our intergovernmental relations policies and priorities, and kind of giving you an opportunity to understand where we're focusing and letting you approve that before we get into the short session this year and get it ready for United Front, all of that. Part of that is going to start to talk about the University District Hospital closure and then ask what we have in there. And that's going to lead into the second work session, which is really just the city manager update to talk about where we're at with that. And Chief Caven is here to join when we get to that part of the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to our intergovernmental relations manager, Ethan Nelson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to put this on to the presentation. All right. So it should be running. There we go. All right. So good evening, Mayor Venice, City Councilors. As Sarah said, Ethan Nelson. I'm the City Eugene Intergovernmental Relations Manager. And really what that is a mouthful, but it means that I support the advocacy efforts to accomplish Eugene's policy and funding goals at the state and federal level. Tonight, we're going to walk through the IGR program goals, the IGR process, 2024 policy framework, our 2024 state priorities, touch briefly on the federal United Front efforts, and then wrap up with a brief discussion, however long you would like to take. And then specifically, just as a reminder, we're asking for council to take action on the two items provided in your packet. And those would be the 2024 Eugene State and Federal Policy Document and the 2024 Eugene State Priorities Document. So to start off with our goals, these goals provide direction for the efforts of the IGR program. Approaching relationships, for our first one, approaching relationships with local, state, and federal partners in an enhanced manner to grow and leverage partnerships for greater engagement of agencies and elected officials. This is something that we're constantly working on, and my role is to support our organization and elected officials to be more engaged at the state and the federal level. Number two, really increasing the participation in policy initiatives. And so that's larger policy discussions at the national and state level. And so that's, for instance, the Federal Communications Commission with a new makeup there. There's going to be more municipal support for right-of-way management, transportation infrastructure, housing, homelessness and shelter, and revenue reform are just some of the areas of policy that we participate in throughout the year. And then number three, leveraging local delegation leadership positions, supporting those. We continue to engage the Eugene State Delegation to collaboratively advance community investments supported via their leadership roles. Fortunately for Eugene, we have senior legislators in Salem that advocate for our interests and also at the federal level. So our process, all rowing together in the same direction. Last month, the council passed Resolution 5387 unanimously. And that adopted a revised IGR committee operating agreements, and that resolution is included as attachment C in your packet. As was discussed during the October work sessions, the IGR committee operating agreements provide direction on how the city of Eugene sets state and federal policy priorities and directs city resources on high priority items to be reviewed and approved by the council's IGR committee. The current IGR committee members include Councilor Evans, Councilors Groves, and Councilor Ye. And Mayor Venice regularly attends the IGR committee member meetings as a non-voting member. The IGR committee meets regularly, generally on a monthly basis, with the ability to hold special meetings during the legislative session. Those meetings are posted on the city's website and open to the public via Zoom. More information on the IGR committee and testimony provided on priority bills can be found on program website. Really try to promote a lot of transparency with all of the information that we're putting on out there. On November 8th, of this year, the IGR committee approved both the policy and the priority documents and sent these to council for your review and discussion with a recommendation to approve for this year. So we're going to jump on into the first document, the policy document. And as many of you know, have heard before. So in preparation for the 2024 Oregon Assembly, staff from across the organization contributed to updating the Eugene state and federal legislative policy document. And that serves as a policy framework which provides clear direction on what the city's positions are on priority topics. For example, local control, and also on pertinent emerging issues. And so one that you have been discussing is Measure 110 reform. So that gave us direction on how, as an organization, we can advocate at the state for on council's behalf. This is of critical importance to clearly support our state and federal advocacy efforts in an efficient and timely manner. And I tend to look at this as the playbook for this session. The 2024 update reflects accumulation of technical expertise in specific areas, staff experience implementing city code and rules, and as members of statewide and national associations. The main update this year is included in the language related to Measure 110 that council gave direction on at the November 8th work session. So, and this document is reviewed and approved by the IGR committee each year and was last approved by full council in December, just a little bit of a year ago. Next, these are the policy focal areas that that we have within that document. And so it's not an all-encompassing document for city policy. The focal areas identified on this cover slide, much of what our city does. In times when we don't have clear guidance, the IGR team will consult with Sarah and executive managers for direction. And as necessary, we'll bring items back to the IGR committee for deliberation. And if required, bring items to the full city council for deliberation. Moving on to the second document in your packet is our 2024 state priorities. And we've got 4 different initiatives this year that we're really focusing in on. Consider the priorities document as really the proactive what Eugene wants, while the previous policy document really just clarifies our position on legislation and bills as they are introduced. And for reference, the upcoming short session starts in early February and will wrap up by March 10th. Legislators and committees are limited to the number of bills that they can provide during the short session. And so there's likely to be in the range of 300 bills introduced in the short session versus the around 3,000 within the long session. And so again, this year, we've contracted with a team at CFM advocates and will continue to be represented by Zach Reeves in Salem. Okay. So the first one, emergency funding to respond to the university district closure. So this is our top priority this year, and to secure that funding. You'll receive an update, as Sarah said, and Chief Caven's here to provide some more updates on that. Regarding the legislative ask, the specifics on that, we're seeking funding for 2 specific efforts. One is first time is a bridge funding to address the unbudgeted financial requirements that Eugene Springfield Fire may need to increase emergency response services. And this could include additional funding for a basic life support ambulance for 2 years, as well as putting a new community response unit team into service. The second is one-time funding to pilot innovative programs that can provide longer-term remedies to decrease decrease in local emergency services. The primary focus is a nurse navigation program that Eugene Springfield Fire would put into service, with the CRU potentially fitting in the innovation category as well. Both the bridge and the innovation concepts are being developed in cooperation with Representative Nathanson, and she's taking the lead on putting together a bill on our behalf, and in collaboration with also other local governments and healthcare providers. And more detailed questions as far as how those programs would work, Chief Caven can answer later in the next work session. So our second one, unhoused response funding. As you know from budget discussions and updates from the city manager, there is a projected gap in funding for this current biennium related to unhoused response funding. This is our top priority request during the 2023 session that was ultimately unsuccessful. There's been an increase in interest from legislators to provide additional funding for emergency shelters and cleanup programs, as well as Governor Kotek is looking to release existing funding within the Oregon Housing Community Services budget to fund emergency shelters. There's currently a $14.6 million package for emergency shelter support being discussed with the League of Oregon City and other partners for this short session. Our projected need is roughly 4.25 to 5.25 million for the remainder of the biennium. And so that's what we're going to be really focusing in on within those different conversations and initiatives that are happening at the legislature. What's really exciting as well is our third priority on housing production, infrastructure and production funding. And so Governor Kotek's Housing Production Advisory Council has been holding meetings since last spring. And out of this process was the growing consensus that housing production won't advance unless cities are provided infrastructure funds. Much of this discussion is centered on quote unquote site-specific projects, but cities, including Eugene, continue to advocate for system-level infrastructure funding. This system-level discussion has gained more traction in recent months, and we are hopeful that the legislature makes funding available for a wide variety of housing-related investments, everything from system-level infrastructure to site-level infrastructure to gap funding on affordable housing construction projects and renovations. And there's discussions in some of the House leadership to put forward about $500 million out of reserves to focus in on housing production and these different elements. So if the funding is successful, we certainly should be able to secure some of that for our local programs and projects. Currently, we have put forward 4 projects for consideration of site-specific infrastructure grants and have updated the Crow Road request from last session to address the full scope of the project. Our request for Crow Road now stands at just about above $5 million with an additional 50% match coming from the city's SDC funding. And then our fourth priority after those first pretty massive, the first 3, we will continue to support Lane County's request for state and federal funding to build and operate a crisis stabilization center. We all recognize the need for robust investments across the behavioral health services spectrum, and that stabilization center is key to providing those services across our community. So those are the 4 priorities that we have currently. And I'm going to switch now to the federal agenda. So the United Front, as many of you know, it's a coalition of regional government partners that advocates and at the federal level in cooperation with one another. And so the annual United Front delegation is likely going to be occurring in late March of 2024. And we are still working through the focus of the trip as the ongoing federal budget negotiations will have an impact on our strategies for that trip. We have a telecom policy, unhoused funding, broadband projects, economic development, and energy climate funding focal areas as potential topics for meetings. And we expect to have our updated United Front book completed in January, and copies will be shared with you all at that time. And so this is, thank you if you have any questions, and we can get into those now. And as a reminder, the motion to approve the policy and priorities documents is in the AIS. So turn it over to you now. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. That was a lot. And can I just ask for clarification on one last point, which is the federal budget you listed 4 things for United Front: telecom, energy and climate, unhoused, and what was the 4th thing? I didn't catch it.
We've got economic development, broadband,
right,
and unhoused funding, telecom policy, and then energy climate funding, the IRA, and tracking that stuff.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I was trying to keep notes and I couldn't write that fast. Okay. Thank you. Are there questions or comments? Councilor Evans?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Ethan, this may be a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Does the legislature realize that we need that infrastructure money for Crow Road if we're going to advance any, building out of residential development?
Yeah, Councilor.
I mean, it's the 2 things are linked together in my mind.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And what's been really helpful is our city engineer, Jennifer Willer, has been engaged in a lot of the conversations. And so is our assistant city manager, Matt Rodriguez, really trying to inform people, legislators, the governor's office, advocates, that while site-specific projects do need capital funding, there's nobody's in disagreement with that. But in the sense of cities really need system level infrastructure. And so in the case of Crow Road, there's projects within, parcels within Crow Road area that get site specific funding. They'll basically be islanded because we don't have the funds and we haven't been able to then extend the services out to meet those site specific parcels and areas and developments. And so there's more and more awareness that, if we need both. And so, but the price tag is pretty staggering across the state. So we'll see what comes out of that. We're hopeful.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Randy? And then
Thank you,
Mike,
Ethan.
and then
First of
Alan.
all, it was a good report. I think these are the right priorities. I intend to support this. But my question, and I know we talked about it at IGR, but for the public that's listening and colleagues, we also need infrastructure out to Clear Lake Road. Can you speak to that a little bit? I know it didn't fit completely in what the state was looking for in their funding packages, but anyway, maybe shed some more light on that for us.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Gross. In last year, one of our priorities was to seek infrastructure funding for Clear Lake Road, and Clear Lake Road is an area that's within our UGB and has been identified for economic development expansion. It needs, again, significant investment related to wastewater and stormwater, water, which is BWEB's, not ours, and then also some transportation improvements. And so without those, they're not considered necessarily shovel ready. And so we're really advocating for that. Here, upcoming in the short session, which as I said, it's about 35 days from February 5th to March 10th, there's going to be a really big focus on infrastructure and housing production. And so that's why we're really focusing in on the Crow Road, but we still have the Clear Lake Road project as priority, and we will continue to advocate for that. Just kind of reading the tea leaves of what's going to be where we'll get our most benefit from our efforts. We're really seeing the focus on housing production this year, and then circle back with continuing to engage our delegation on the focus that economic development is long-term, financial stability to bring revenue and jobs and commerce into the community.
Thank you for that explanation. And I know Councilor Evans and I have met with a number of manufacturers that were interested in locating here, and they actually get to the point of being excited about it until they start looking for property. And there just isn't any that meets their minimums, which most of these are like 100-acre parcels that they're looking for. So this is really critical in the future. I understand now, but this is something we need to keep coming back and continuing to hammer on if we're going to have hopes of kind of changing our financial picture and creating more living wage jobs, which is the other side of affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, and then Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. Ethan, I want to ask this question delicately. I'm not trying to offend. I'm not trying to, put anybody on the spot, but I think it's specific and important. So I'm asking for your assessment and correction if my facts are wrong. My understanding was that House Bill 3414 did not pass in this last session. Do I have that correct?
Correct.
And that was Representative Fahey's bill. Is that correct?
It was she was one of the chief sponsors or co-sponsors, but it was really the Governor Kotek's.
That's what I thought. And from my understanding, she sat with home builders. She sat with an awful lot of folks to try and come up with a nice compromise that can help with what is apparently the short session's one of their chief goals, and ours as well. And would you say that's correct?
House Bill 3414 is coming back. It's been folded into the governor's housing production framework, and staff has actively been reviewing those policies and providing feedback on how to make it work here in Eugene. So yes, it is part of the governor's production package, but we'll see if it becomes a bill, and then also if the legislators are going to be putting that forward as well.
I personally would have I would have approved of that personally. I was in favor of that bill. My understanding was that some of our representatives or folks associated with the city spoke against that bill at the legislature. Is that correct?
There was legislators, so when the bill came on out, and this was from last year, 3414, there was a significant loss of local control related to land use decisions, which is counter to council's adopted policies. And so in that vein, Mayor Venice provided testimony. We provided testimony. I provided testimony. And then the vote came down to on the Senate side, and two senators that represent our community, right. Senator Przansky and Senator Manning, voted against the bill. It didn't move forward. And so now it's coming on back in a retooled version that actually addresses a lot of the concerns that we had from a loss of local control. And so we're in
Is there something individual counselors can do on behalf of speaking with legislators or giving testimony that would give this a better chance of passing in this next session? My understanding was that was a part of the governor's promise to provide 36,000 housing units in the state in the first year. And I'd like to see that occur. I think it's badly needed. Is there something we can do that will be helpful?
Well, I think there's yes. The council has taken action with the documents that are provided in front of you that gives direction and clarity for staff to then advocate, and that includes all staff across our organization. And then I prepare testimony and work with either Mayor Venice or if there's another IGR committee member that'll come and give testimony on behalf of that council direction. And then if an individual counselor should choose and want to provide your own feedback, then there's guidance in the resolution, which I addressed in council operating agreements and IGR operating agreements, that gives that process on how to do that, so that you're in alignment with council adopted policy.
Is it a counselor's ability to give testimony that would not be in alignment with adopted policy?
Certainly, as an elected official, you're able to represent your own voice. It would just, as in the resolution in the council process, it's that you have to signify that you're speaking on behalf of yourself, not for the city council or the city of Eugene.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir, very much. Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Alan.
Could you pull up slide 5? And I'll respond to HB 3414.
I'm locked out of this one.
Didn't pass because it went too far. It eliminated too many protections and had too much loss of local control. And that's why it didn't pass. Maybe if they fix some of those.
Which one did you want, Councilor?
5. The reason I wanted you to pull up 5 is that fountain that is on the right side of the picture there is actually made by a local Eugenian, Bill Blix, who lives in Laurel Valley. He actually welded that with his own 2 hands, and it stands, and it's a great little fountain and a really historic piece now, but built by Bill Blix from Eugene. The 2023 process, I think it was unanimous because I voted for it because I was better than what we were doing before. I still believe if you're not on the IGA, you really don't know what's going on. You can't provide that much input. And the council needs more engagement in this process. So thank you for this work session. I hope that prior to and during the short session in February, the legislature and the IGR work gets on the full council agenda numerous times so we can track what's going on and provide direction as we're supposed to be doing. I think the 4 priorities that we have at the state level are the right ones, and I'll support them.
Right. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Okay. So if that's the case, I will turn it over to Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt the recommended changes to the 2024 Eugene State and Federal Policies document. And the 2024 Eugene State Priorities document is approved by the IGR Committee in attachment A and B.
Second.
Hey, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Ethan, for really explaining that so succinctly and so completely. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, we are ready to move on to our second item, and we get to have Chief Caven here again, which is maybe a record for a chief appearing so frequently before council. So thank you.
He's still behind Heppel with.
Oh, maybe so.
He was here every week.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true.
But was anybody
We're getting
really here?
close.
We've been here physically.
We'll listen just as intently.
All right. With that, I'll turn it over to the manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So the second work session is just a city manager update. As you know, we added this to the agenda so that things dropped off. And so in this example, we did have something drop off, the Riverfront Urban Renewal. We weren't ready for the next work session. So it's a good opportunity to just keep you posted on emerging topics. We've spent a couple of these talking about the University District Hospital closure. So just a couple of updates on that. And I know you all wanted to have opportunities to ask questions about that and engage in that. So sometime in, I think the last time that I was here, I let you know that the governor's office had responded to Peace Health's request for waivers with a, hey, we want you to slow this down, maybe wait until next July, do a lot more communication and outreach. And we're got a pretty strong no to that in terms of the direness of their situation and inability to really stay open past December 1st. So they've stayed pretty solid to their December 1st timeline, which is this Friday. And based on that, I want to say the state has been amazingly communicative, easy to work with, and has incorporated a lot of our concerns into what they're asking from Peace Health as part of that, which is really an enhanced communication plan. They're asking them to work with all the transport providers, sign agreements. They're asking for more information on data and demographics and weighing in on some of their staffing and training protocols as well, which is, I think, new. So they're really trying to engage and make sure that our community is being served well. Peace Health has also invited us to a lot more meetings, which I'm not going to, but I'm sure that Chief Caven can talk about. They did ultimately approve the waiver for them to close this Friday. I don't know if they've approved the waiver around the behavioral health unit yet, but I know it was coming, so it feels like it might have happened. And a couple other things that Chief Caven can talk about. Representative Nathanson has been doing a lot of work convening people, trying to understand if there's a bill to bring forward, which we just talked about. And I think I've had a lot of conversations in the community around what this means. And one of the things that I would say I feel a lot different about today than I did at the beginning of this is recognizing how lucky we are to have a state-of-the-art hospital like Riverbend and McKinsey Willamette. And like any business, I don't know why this one would be considered different. Our retention strategies around that and making sure that what we have stays is probably our most important priority as we start to think about how you build going forward. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. So I also want to say that part of what I feel bad about with this whole process is mostly that we all got caught off guard a little bit. And I think that's always the case when you have changes in leadership. You know, I think about going through COVID, had a lot of regular conversations with Mary Kingston, and when she left with Todd Solness, but hadn't had an opportunity yet to meet with the new interim CEO. And I think some of that could have potentially happened differently. And so it's a reminder to me that when we have new CEO stepping in, that I need to make immediate relationships and connections so that none of us are caught off guard going forward. But with that, we have December 1st right around the corner. I know a lot of community members and you are concerned about that. And so I thought it would be helpful to have Chief Caven here to talk about the work he's been doing to prepare us to this point for this Friday, which actually starts the day before, I think, based on what I've read.
Ish.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. I'll open, since it's a work session, maybe with a little bit of humor. Has everybody seen the movie Backdraft? I'm not sure Councilor Gross has. If you recall the first fire that Brian McCaffrey went to and they didn't have any water, they were asking where backup was. It was kind of his John Wayne time, right? That's kind of our initial feeling as we roll into December 1st. A lot of work has been done, a lot of conversation has been had, but we also recognized from the beginning that we needed to be prepared for nobody to be there except for us in the 911 system on December 1st to kind of catch the community, help guide, navigate behaviors, and again, continue planning for that future piece. And so I'd open just appreciation for the IGR committee and the council for moving this issue to the top of the priorities with so many other important issues that the city's trying to focus on. Means a lot to us to work on that funding for both bridge and then some of those long-term and alternative response strategies. And so I'm going to start kind of move through what are we going to do on Friday? And then what are the strategies that Ethan talked about that we're looking at the state to work with, Peace Health, the county, kind of everybody, what does the next 6 months or 12 months look like? So as far as December 1st goes, we've taken a strategy, been very communicative with our staff, trying to prepare for it, making sure that other alternative services, the CCOs, which are the community care organizations that help navigate folks in Medicare and Medicaid, which is 80% of our users, are prepared and helping, educate their constituents. For us, we stopped transporting people to University District ER on the 29th at noon. And that is to start to slow the burden of people being in the emergency room. Because some of those folks end up upstairs. Those folks that need some extra care are going to be in the hospital a little while longer, but don't need the specialty care at Riverbend. They go there. And so our goal is to try to start to slowly wean off the total amount of patients that are running into the hospital. Mind you, at the same time, they're going to be shutting down the West Eugene urgent care in preparation to move it to downtown that morning. We'll be standing up 2 units in the beginning to understand our surge capacity during peak hours. The first one you guys heard a little bit about in the budget process when we were trying to figure out what to do and budget reduction strategies. So we'll be deploying a squad, which is a unit with 2 people on it. That's going to be geo-fenced basically from the Highway 99 area to Agate and from the river to 18th Street. So where we know the corridors of people funneling into University District Hospital in particular, those folks who are there for other reasons other than acute medical care. So they are calling them their friendly faces. This unit will operate from 9 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock at night, unless the system needs more capacity, and then those staff will hold over and work until things die down. We'll also be staffing up an additional medic unit that will come out of the Valley River Station. It's kind of the next closest unit that's not staffed into downtown Eugene. That unit will also operate during peak hours. Our initial trial period is for the month of December, so that we get an understanding with our data what's really happening. We're fortunate you've seen some of Tyler Baird, our data analyst's work before. He's able to generate system reports of what's going on the next morning for us. So we can tell what are the trends. Is the community navigating towards 911, or are they finding other ways to deal with the issue? And so we can make decisions on staffing, on hours of units in service for, X period of time. We've committed to making any adjustments in standing up additional units or standing down every Monday when we review the previous week's data to make sure that we're staying flexible and we're trying to stay within budget as we try to tackle some other issues, within the city. So in the interim, Mid-Valley Ambulance, which we were here talking to you guys about the risk of losing them this same time last year, they're going to have some capacity. They were transporting about 1,600 people out of the University District Hospital to Riverbend. So they're going to have some capacity to help support us as well. We're working on changing our run files to bring those ambulances into service for those lower acuity calls out on the street sooner, to make sure that we maintain a balanced capacity. We've already taken steps in redeploying some of our ambulances to balance both the unit reliability and the overall workload on those ambulances. So these four things combined kind of have us set up to dip our toes in, see what's going to happen, and make sure that there's enough resources in the city should things start to go sideways. We will continue our practice if we run out of units and we need a fire crew to temporarily staff an ambulance to help support capacity. It's not ideal, but it's there. The other challenge we're running against is as we staff up additional units to solve this potential issue, we're running out of ambulances to staff. You guys all heard in, I think, early 2022, the CSI helped fund 3 additional ambulances to support our redesign. We still don't have those. We're expecting them somewhere in the next 90 to 120 days. But that's kind of the reality in getting vehicles to help support this work. And so we feel like we've got a good approach that's going to take care of the community. It's going to help keep our staff from being tremendously overburdened unless we need to bring more of them back in and force them to work to help cover this gap. We don't anticipate that that's going to be needed, but we have that tool in reserve as well. Moving beyond December 1st or even, January 1st of 2024, some of our strategies that we're working on that we've requested through the IGR and really Representative Nathanson jumped on this wholeheartedly, all in, gathered stakeholders from the city, the county, her constituency, other representative officials, so kind of hear what the problems are, hear the challenges from the hospitals, from the university, from us, from the CCOs, kind of everybody that's all in on this. And out of that, we made some requests that you see in your packet. The first of which is funding for our bridge solution. So whether it's the squad or the ambulance capacity, that there's a source that as we start to build these resources into the system, that we have some solution for cost recovery. One of the benefits of this biennial budget that we transitioned into, we're not in crisis mode trying to figure out how are we going to pay this, how are we going to balance the budget immediately. We can face the problem, figure out what happened, and then how to make adjustments to account for it throughout the second year of the budget. So that's kind of helpful for us as we imagine how we're going to deal with that. So that bridge funding will help solve that problem. The next one is nurse navigation. You guys have heard us talk about this before, is nurse triage. We had a presentation, and if there's interest, we could send it out to the council to review. Global Medical Response, which is the international parent company of American Medical Response, came in, did a presentation. They have a nurse call center back in Texas where they have RNs and LPNs that take calls out of the 911 systems. Just like we triage patients today, folks call in a 911 system and they're diverted. They're not forcibly diverted. They're asked, hey, would you like to talk to a nurse? This program, they come in and they research, they meet with all the different resource types in your community, so they know the catalog and how to deal with that. The probably most exciting part of this program is they have a contract for ride sharing service, both to and from treatment, whether it's the emergency room, whether it's urgent care, whether it's some other type of clinic, and you don't have the means, which is not always, but a number of times that ambulances are called, so they don't have a means of getting to medical care. This comes with that. It's built in, it's paid for as a part of the contract. People call, they get a ride there, they get a ride back, they're happy, they do follow-up quality assurance. It's actually a pretty exciting program. Whereas if we look back to previously thinking about nurse triage, that's talking about putting a nurse over in dispatch and trying to manage that one person's experience, workflow, retention, all of that. This, we contract the service out to a call center that knows resources in our community, ties into our dispatch center. The call stays live, so our community is not abandoned when they're transferred over there. about 2 to 4% of those calls come back as emergencies, and the call's still open. So there's really not a delay if something was missed in that transfer from the dispatch center. So that's one of the asks. The other one is the community response unit, which you all have heard about before. That was what was lost in the CSI as we transition to stabilizing funding for a fire company. This is an alternative service delivery model to get out on some of these lower acuity calls, meet people where they are, and try to navigate them a little bit differently. Think almost like Cahoots, but for EMS. Spend a little bit more time, help direct people in that space. And so that looking for that funding resource is a new and emerging pilot project from the state. So those are the biggest components to what we see. We continue conversations with the county, with the CCOs around community paramedicine. These are paramedics that really oftentimes are funded by the healthcare system or the CCOs to prevent readmits into the ER. A lot of people who get discharged in the stressed healthcare system that we have today get discharged earlier than most of us remember 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, and often without access to a pharmacy or other resources. They run out of options and they call 911 and they end up back in the emergency room in an ambulance, causing kind of decking in the system where people can't get out, can't get treated. This works to prevent those additional 911 calls. And so we continue to pursue that. The county and Peace Health have facilitated conversations about putting providers in the field. So the nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, again, to help target those high use areas. So the service station on Highway 99, where we see anywhere between 800 and 1,000 calls for service a year, if we can target that with a different type of resource, not only does it free up our ambulances, it frees up fire suppression crews that are often sent to run first response, first aid on those calls. And so those things continue, but all of those strategies, right, are months to a year out before we really start to see those play into the system. Those are all strategies that are in our playbook already. This has just introduced a few different ways to access funding and build partnerships where maybe we weren't looking for them before. And so there is a little bit of I think a bright spot on the backside of that we will see better outcomes in our side of the system as a result of this, despite the challenges and the frustration that exists in the environment today. So I think I covered most of the topics I was supposed to. Thank
you very much. I was scribbling. I keep hearing this and I'm layering it and trying to keep up with it, but it's actually such an encouraging report, thinking about the things that you have said to us before. We had all these things. We were working on all these things. We just have to move on them faster. And so I just really appreciate being reminded of that. I really appreciate where Representative Nathanson has stepped in a leadership role to help sort of carry this coherent message at the state level is really helpful. Okay, I have Randy and Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chief, for the presentation. I think you and your team have been very proactive in trying to look at this without having a lot of resources to play with. So I do recognize that and I appreciate it. And I too want to lend my voice to thanking Representative Nathanson for jumping on this and having a strong hand in state level policy and assistance. My first question is about wall time. Has that dropped any, or I know we're starting to bill the hospital when we have paramedic team standing there with a patient for sometimes hours on end when we need to get that resource back out on the street. How has the responsiveness been there?
Challenging as it has been for the last several years. We did issue our first quarterly bills to the facilities just past the 1st of October. The total of those bills between Eugene and Springfield and then the 3 facilities was about $327,000. So you might imagine we spent a lot of time on the wall. It's a big number. It caught the attention of both hospital facilities, brought them to the table to kind of talk about not only what our methodology was behind it, but also, how to avoid it, which we don't want to bill. We don't want our ambulances stuck on the wall, right? And that's been our consistent message with them. I think it's brought some more players to the table to hear our solutions, which include what's called a transfer medic. In the hospital service, when we're sitting on a wall, and we've had this happen where patients are ill, sometimes critically ill, and we have to do life-saving interventions. We technically are not legally allowed to do our work inside the walls of a hospital. And so it puts us in a really dicey scenario when that happens. However, that same law that prevents us from doing that says that if a EMT basic, which is a couple tiers lower than most of us paramedics, is employed by or contracted to the hospital for relatively low cost, that EMT basic can watch X number of patients, right? Because that patient is the legal responsibility of the hospital. And so we've been trying to provide solutions such as those that get our units out and back on the street sooner. Again, we're seeing now the downstream effect of those things happening only, prolong or worsen the wall time issue. But
Since I haven't been involved, obviously, in the discussions, are the hospitals acknowledging that they have a problem?
yes,
Because this is their problem.
yeah. We had a meeting, Alicia from Peace Health has been great. She'll have any meeting when we call for it. We were kind of talking about that today, is those strategies they see in, how does the EMS system sometimes make the problem worse when there's other hospitals available, based on where people go, that cause challenges, both the education of people who are going to the emergency room that shouldn't be there, weighing into that. But there's also an acknowledgement of staffing and throughput and all of those things that collectively create that.
And we just lost 50% of the other hospitals.
Yes.
So, okay. Well, I appreciate that. And again, I feel that you and your team are doing everything you can. My next question, obviously you need to develop a new baseline. Is December the best month to do that in? And how do your statistics look as December compared to other months in winter?
Well, it depends, right? As you know, and probably most people grasp, is the calls for us. I mean, we're busy. We're almost, especially a number of our core units, are about as busy as they can get. We can't throw a whole lot more calls on them. But through the seasons, you see that change, right? Cold weather issues. We saw a flurry of fires over this weekend, warming fires becoming, structure fires becoming, you name it. As far as measuring, so these resources that we're going to put on the street for the month of December is really to get a sense of, do we have the capacity? Do we have some surge? Should there be a big surge just related to this hospital? Tracking the actual behaviors of people who are seeking care, whether it's at University District or folks in West Eugene who don't have an urgent care anymore, figuring out how to navigate that and really tracking that data will take some time. As I mentioned, our data analyst is awesome. It's quick and efficient, but we're also on the verge of signing a contract with a data analytics program that does amazing things as well to help us build upon where are we seeing those pockets, where are we coalescing people for care, shelter, those types of things. And again, deploying a different type of resource out there. Because as we think about the problem and manage around that, and especially around budget challenges, you think about what is our core mission, and what resources do we need to put in place to make sure that those resources that are part of the core mission are available to do their work. And that's, fire suppression, fire prevention, and emergency medical, first response, and transport. And so those are the tool systems that we continue to work. So you're right, December, no 1 month period, no 1 week period is going to give you the data you need to say, yep, we got that right. What we're just trying to do is say, do we have it? Do we have the community okay as we navigate this?
You have to start somewhere. I recognize that. I was just going to encourage you to look at a larger data set than that.
Oh yeah.
So that's, and when you come back in the future, I would like to hear how response reliability is being managed with the ambulance system. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alan?
Yeah, thanks. I agree. We do have two really great hospitals in our community at Riverbend and McKenzie-Willamette. And this closure of the University District is an important issue. I think it's a good plan. I agree. It's very proactive. And I'd like to thank Representative Nathanson for her help on this. It's very much appreciated. But there are a lot of people that think this is a lot worse than it really is. The hospital actually hasn't moved out of there a long time ago, correct?
Yeah, when we go back to that core mission of emergency medical work, those people who actually needed an ambulance were going to Riverbend or McKenzie-Willamette for cardiac, stroke, trauma. Again, the hospital down here, geriatric care, some rehabilitation stuff, things that needed urgent care that might get you admitted for observation. That's the type of facility, that's the inpatient services that they were providing.
Yeah. So when people think of it looks like a big hospital, but it really was pretty minimal services there. And if you're in critical need, nothing's really changing that much. We're still going to Riverbend. We have for years, correct?
Yeah.
So if you're in really bad shape, that's systems in place and going to stay in place.
We just anticipate it being busier. Stacked up more.
Right, because there's less places. So how many transports per day did we bring to the University District ER, and what was the nature of them?
So we were bringing, I want to say on average, 15 transports a day to the University District. Most of those range from respiratory to abdominal issues. About 14% of those were behavioral health when we did our analysis. And so despite it being the behavioral health center, most of the time, as you may or may not know, behavioral health issues are tied directly to just overall health or access to healthcare issues.
Sure.
They would find themselves at other hospitals for issues and then transferred back for behavioral health care if they had other things going on.
So your plan actually either transports them to Riverbend or McKenzie-Willamette or deals with them in an alternative way. So the plan is to try to cover all of that and still meet the services that those people need.
Yeah, from our impact, right? When we think about 14 or even 20 transports a day, isn't that big. And the fact that we had those people are already taking them. I mean, we calculated the hours and the additional wall time and travel time and the 1,900 additional hours we'd be out of service because of that. In the grand scheme of our system and the 50,000 calls that we run, that's a drop in the bucket. Our concern all along is for the other 81 people that were accessing that ER every day, how are they going to get?
Those are walk-ins.
Yep.
Mostly. Yeah. Yeah. But the system where you're in really bad shape that we've been sending them over to other hospitals for a very long time. Can you talk about the urgent care that's going to move into the University District? When's it going to happen? Where's it going to go exactly? What services are going to be provided?
So, and I don't have it directly in front of me. As I recall, they're going to shut down at noon on the 27th at West Eugene Urgent Care. And at 8 a.m. on the 29th, they're going to open up at 12:01 Hilliard, I think. But across the street in the medical building, just to the west of.
Right across the causeway.
Yep.
Over there.
They're going to offer the same suite of services that they offer out at West 11th, with the caveat of they're adding a bed to manage behavioral health. So kind of secure bed so that when people do navigate down there, they're having some type of crisis, they have a way to deal with them safely. And they've done a lot of work not on our side of things, but with their security, EPD, SPD, UOPD, on how security will work and how those patients that are in crisis are managed there and then dealt with in a secure way that takes care of them and their needs.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, good plan, by the way.
Thank you. I've got Matt and then Greg.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. And excuse me, echoing my gratitude and appreciation for Representative Nathanson taking the lead on bringing stakeholders together to find a solution that's win-win for our community. The piece about contracting out for non-emergency nurse triaging is both curious as well as it is, well, it's intriguing as well as it is concerning. The intriguing part revolves around the 96% plus non-emergency pieces that may involve mental health care, behavioral health assistance. I'm wondering if you could expand on that. Is it similar to how like some communities have a 3-digit number wherein you can call for a non-emergency acute mental health crises? Number two, the concerning piece is what oversight, if any, would you or your department have in ensuring that persons who we would be contracting out with are fully trained, certified, and represented as part of a workforce earning a living wage? My fear is that while on the surface this is convenient, such a move puts local future jobs at risk.
So as far as oversight in the calls in that system, we direct which calls can go. Our medical director would oversee the types of calls that can be sent there. We review the call types, the experiences. They follow up with people after they've used it. Did they get the care that they need? Were they, did they have to go back? Did they access 911 later? They do a tremendous amount of feedback work into that system to understand the experience of the patient. And it drops down from severity, right? Is to go back to the 911 system, to more delayed response from one of our resources or one of our contracted ambulances to provide the service, to Ride Source, to Ask a Nurse, to Cahoots in our system that could be put into that fold. I mean, we get to dictate exactly where those calls go and the services that our community members are provided. And so there is a high level of oversight in that program. They're uniquely tailored to your system. The other piece is to do this work, they have to have people that are licensed in our state. And so from that end, I can't speak directly at this point in the process to understand exactly what are their wages at their call center. They reported in their presentation, good retention, recruitment. That's always a sign that, where they are, they're paying a fair market value for that work, for those RNs, for those LPNs. Really, why they're able to do this is it's economies of scale. The handful of cities, the Vancouver, Washington area is joining in or just joined in recently. And so as they grow, that helps make that service available because, as I mentioned, we've talked about this before, but it would cost us almost twice as much to try to put one nurse on duty half of a day. And so that's really what cogs us up. Could we or could somebody, I mean, obviously not we, but could somebody locally mirror that type of service and try to build one? Maybe, but it's just starting to get up and get growing as a service area. And so completely hear what you're saying. From my background as a labor person, I care a lot about wages and opportunities for folks. At this point in our community, this feels like our best solution. And so far from the outside looking in, this call center, the workforce there, the tenure that they have in the 5 years that they've been building this program appears on the surface pretty good.
In my legislative capacity, my boss and I entertained a meeting with an out-of-state company who prides themselves on buying out flailing or failing hospitals and bringing in seemingly an international team to essentially save a local hospital. while this particular entity may not be the best fit for our community, are you hopeful or optimistic that an outside entity will breathe life back into the University District Emergency Department?
If I could make a wish and say what would I want to have happen, like we did when Riverbend was built, we'd like to see a hospital move a little bit further west so that people have better access. Because where we're at right now, we're not that far away from University District to Riverbend to McKinsey-Willamette. But if we had one, you know, I don't know, 2 miles west of here, pick your favorite property next to a baseball stadium. That would be fantastic. And that would be a great outcome because people would have relatively equitable access to care and timely care. And that helps us in our resource availability. If we're coming out of the hospital, what worked for us, and you know, Councilor Groves can speak to it as well. We've always been a busy system. We've always been short on ambulances. What made it work for so long was that in Eugene, all of our ambulances were right down here at the full service hospital, and really only 4 miles from, you know, the Bailey Hill station, which is about the furthest out from here. That's pretty quick turnaround. We would take calls before we drop patients off, because we knew we could drop patient off and go take that call, and we kept the system going and running. It was okay. It was busy. But the minute Riverbend was built, and now we're 12 miles away from those locations, then we weren't able to service the community the same way, that having better kind of geographics. So no, I don't want something downtown, but something right outside of downtown towards West Eugene would be great for everybody.
Like the fairgrounds. So picking up what you're putting down, Lane County,
On my space.
public, private, if you're hearing me, this is an opportunity for rebranding. If the stadium were built right next to a hospital, we could call them the Eugene EMS.
I read every email that comes in that says save EMS, save our EMS. I'm like, one of these times, maybe somebody will send in an email. It'll be about.
Chief Caven, thank you for your service. And I know the holiday weekend was a busy weekend for you and your team. So thank you for all you do for our community.
Thank you. Craig.
Yeah, I have 2 questions for you. One, you may not be able to answer. The other one, I know you can answer. The first question is there a plan? Do the hospitals have a plan to replace the West Eugene urgent care? And is there a long-term plan to address kind of the area need with West Eugene?
The hospitals do not have a plan for that. There is a plan. It's just not ready for prime time. But there's a plan in the works. There leasing discussions underway that'll be in that facility. Don't have a timeline for exactly when that will happen or exactly what services will be offered there. But in all these conversations that we've been having in partnerships, there's a tenant ready to go in that will provide open access to everybody in the community that needs care. So it won't be a private for-profit urgent care. That's about all I can say about that.
So we just don't know when that's gonna happen. It's somewhere down.
Don't have an exact date. I mean, I anticipate it sooner rather than later, just not on the day that it's already set up as a medical clinic. It already, and so those timelines, I would anticipate more information on that. I can't promise before winter break, but maybe right after winter break when you guys get back, there should be some news on that front.
And my second question goes back to the ambulances that you guys have ordered. They're BLS or ALS, or are you getting 1 or 2 of you know
the ones we ordered?
Yeah, and with that, are we held up by a manufacturer and getting them in, or is it we're being bumped by other communities who got in front of us?
Chassis access has been the biggest issue. So to go back to what type of ambulances they are for helping expand the BLS system. They're smaller, lighter, more efficient ambulances. That being said, they'll still be fully ALS capable. They just won't have, our ambulances are bigger than what a normal ambulance is because there's all the firefighting equipment on it. As we start to change the way we deploy those, they're getting smaller. There's still advanced life support. Our BLS ambulances are designed. So should you end up with a BLS ambulance and you are having an emergency that requires ALS, the engine crew that did the first response on that is able to be the paramedics that take you into the hospital without you missing a beat or any time in getting definitive care. So all of our ambulances are capable to provide the highest level of service regardless of who is actually staffing it that day. Our staff, and as in case I don't get a chance earlier, appreciate the accolades for them. They've done a tremendous amount of work, my team, in just solving problems, sitting in meetings that I can't be in all of them. To that end, they've been aggressive in following the market and chasing down chassis when they become available and plucking. I mean, it is cutthroat out there when a van chassis comes available. And so we've got two of them that are in front of the third because we are aggressively pursuing everyone that came available. It's just Ford and the chips and demand.
It's a new movie, Chasing Chassis.
Chasing chassis, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm buying fire trucks that, who knows? The fire chief that replaces me down the road will probably get all the credit for, look at all these fire trucks, the new chief.
All right. Thanks, Chief.
All right,
That's a lot.
Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Chief. I know I've really appreciated the way you've dealt with this problem. You come with a lot of confidence and, we're going to figure this out. And it sounds like a very good team backing you up. So I'm sure it makes me feel a lot more confident. I'm sure the community also has really appreciated the way you've really stepped up and dealt with this. So thank you for that, first of all. I also really appreciate Representative Nathanson's bills. They sound great. I'm so glad she's been building a coalition and working on this. But what happens if we don't get them? Or are we in a position where we're very confident that at least one of them will be successful? And that may be something you can't answer. Then maybe that's an Ethan question. I don't know.
Well, my guess is Ethan probably has the same answer: is you hope for the best and prepare for the worst. You never know. There's a lot of dynamics at the legislature between how they show up and what bills are in front of them and the work to get done. And so you never know. These are strategies that we haven't just put our eggs over there. Like, yep, this is where it's going to be. We continuously reevaluate the policy team for the community safety payroll tax, evaluates the funds or health there and strategies that we're employing. The private partner or community partnerships with Peace Health and CCOs that can help step in. There's more layers that we're pursuing should that not pan out. As a firefighter, I'd love it all to be done in just, maybe 4 minutes or less. But we know that that's not possible, but we continue to look for the solution that will, short of buying lottery tickets.
Okay, so I guess
Philo
what I'm
would
hearing
like
is
that.
this is one strategy that you're working on, but should that not work, there are things we're working on as backups that, the community can know that we have not put all of our eggs in this one basket, that should this not work out, there are things that we'll pivot to, essentially.
Correct. It's, the funding that comes from wall time as we see how that plays out, even in a one-time basis to start some of these initiatives, there's value in that. So we watch and see as that comes in, how do we leverage revenue-backed solutions? But the strategies asked for and that we will employ someday, one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
They're the right things for the community. It ties into the alternative response work that we're doing. All of that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
This is just, again, it's one opportunity based on this emergency to bring those strategies forward and improve the concept. In the presentation we got on nurse navigation, the state of Colorado actually funded that as a pilot project. Aurora, Colorado did a great video on it. If you Google Aurora, Colorado nurse navigation, it's quick, it's 2-3 minutes. It's really great, kind of talks about what it's doing for them and then how it's leveraged them to what you've heard us talk about for a few years now, right resource to the right call.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first layer to them then talking about longer response times. So to pull back on the 4-minute comment, we're talking about strategies, the industry is talking about strategies. Part of what's weighing us down is response metrics that are based on people utilizing our systems for emergencies. We have to pull back and realize that there's a lot of those that can take more time. It's okay if the response time standard changes to 30 minutes, because you've had belly pain for 2 days, those types of things. And so again, all of these strategies, they'll happen. Just when and how we fund that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else with Alan, I know wants a second round. I guess you're up. Go for it.
Yeah, I understand that Peace Health was losing $2 million a month at the University District. And almost always ERs are attached to full service hospitals. Does a standalone ER actually work as a business model?
So, I mean, to answer that question, and I'll preface this with I'm not an expert in hospitals. I've learned a lot in a few months without even staying in a Holiday Inn. This is playing out across the country. We're not alone. We're not the first ones. We won't be the last. And part of what drives that when you talk to the executives at the hospital is those high value services that paid the bills. Those are all at day surgery centers now. Complex neurosurgery, orthopedics, you name it. Those do not happen in a hospital anymore. So the hospital is not the one billing all that money. And so now they're stuck with, they provide the surgeries for those that don't have the means to pay for it. And they provide the less profitable kind of run of the mill services. And so to answer your question, a full service ER without a highly functioning state-of-the-art hospital will never be profitable because they need to be able to pipeline. That's why University District was so scaled back. They didn't accept trauma because you have to have a surgeon on site. You have to have a surgical suite. You have to have all of these things in place. And without trauma, you're dealing with run-of-the-mill medical things that don't really belong in emergency rooms, right? So standalone as the ER, I don't see it. Major metropolitan area where you're affiliated with another hospital system and, you're maybe even the healthcare provider, the insurance provider, maybe. But for us, a really high functioning urgent care would do it with CT and imaging access. I mean, that's the other thing that we're hearing in the system, right, is access to imaging. And if any of y'all have had to have a CT or ultrasound or anything in recent years, sometimes even an X-ray, it's days, weeks, sometimes months, depending on your issue, before you can get that done. Because it's not just about facilities and access. They don't have staff to run the machines. So it's a big challenge, but an ER, that was what Peace Health said. It's not profitable, not attached to hospital, because they can't accept those high paying patients. They have to go by our protocols and county protocols and state protocols. They have to go to the full service state of the art facility.
Yeah, another good scenario where a single payer system would probably not have these problems. So that all makes me think that a third full service hospital in the metro area is pretty tough to pull off from a business perspective for someone to come in and invest hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. I mean, if you think 17 years ago, when Riverbend was built as a $500 million facility, I can't even imagine what that would cost today, or how long it would take to build.
Or even a smaller version of it.
Yeah. Depending on the type of full service hospital or what it is, whether it's public or private or what, it's really hard to say. Where facilities go again, if you had a crystal ball, or you could just move pieces around the board, like, Matt and Denny and those engineer and planning folks like to do. If you could just pull one of those hospitals out of Springfield and counter the metro area and treat it as that's the type of solution that you could see playing out. But McKinsey Willamette recently invested a lot of money in rehabbing their facility, right? And so it's a challenge between investment and revenue opportunities for sure.
Thank you. Emily?
Thank you. Just pretty much to reiterate what everybody else has said, you really helped. This has been a very scary proposition for most of the city, and it's not the solution we want, which is yet another hospital. But in Eugene, I agree, farther west, downtown could go west as well as east. But you've really thought it out. You've really talked to people, and I find that very reassuring, even though we don't know the answers. We don't know what we're going to know January 1st, but that you've got an outline, you've got flow charts of what could happen. I think that's really helpful. I also think it's interesting that some of the strategies we've discussed in the past, like the smaller units, that we had to put aside for that time being, that work is still valid because now the time has come where we're really going to have the space. So we'll have to figure out how to make those happen. But mostly a really big thank you. And that's what the fire department does for us, is it makes us feel reassured that when things go wrong, somebody will come help us. So thank you.
And I really appreciate that. And I have a tremendous amount of pride in our organization, and most importantly, the people that are out on the streets doing this work. You know, as I listen to calls go out where there's no resources to dispatch to it, they always materialize out of nowhere. They figure out how to clear from a call, reduce resources here to slide over there. The merged environment, the depth that Eugene Springfield Fire provides, that helps us shift where the needs are. But without the firefighters and their mindset to get the job done and find a way and to get available and to cover the calls, no matter how busy, how tired, how frustrated they are, they continue to show up. They continue to do great work. And I know you all have a tremendous amount of pride, as I do, in them. And so for that, none of this December 1st or beyond would happen without them, and they will have the communities back at every turn. You can rest assured.
Well, please make sure they all know that. No, I'm telling you, but every single one of you is saving lives and making those of us that aren't on the cusp of needing our lives saved feel better.
You're here.
Thank you very much. This was such a helpful conversation. Really, again, appreciate the thoroughness with which you've answered all of our questions and clarified. I always feel much better informed and well-grounded in what's actually happening and what we can expect. So very much appreciate your work and your whole department, your whole team. And I think with that, if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you so much.